Hey there, unfortunately, grocery prices are just not coming down anytime soon. So today I will be sharing 25, yes, I said 25, of my family's favorite dinners that you can make for only $5. These dinners are very affordable, but they do not taste cheap. They're still full of flavor, nutrient rich, and delicious. Let's get to my kitchen and let's get started. Okay, to start us off today, this one is a favorite for sure. This tamale casserole is so good. While I'm at the grocery store, I do want to show you the products that I'm getting to stay right around $5. First, I need a half a pound of ground turkey for this recipe, so I went down the turkey aisle, and the cheapest turkey I could find was right around $4, so that was out of budget, but I looked over to the middle frozen meats aisle, and I saw a pound of ground turkey for just $2.54. So I grabbed that and I put it in my cart. Next, I'm going to be picking up a can of red enchilada sauce. This will add a ton of flavor to this dinner. Next, I'm going to be picking up a can of corn, and I tend to buy the store-named products over the name brand products just because the store-name products are typically a lot less expensive. So for example, this can of corn is 74 cents cheaper for basically the same thing. I'm just getting the store name versus the name brand. So I definitely suggest you doing that. Next thing I'm grabbing is a can of pinto beans, then off to the baking aisle where I'm going to be grabbing a box of Jiffy corn muffin mix. I got the original box, which is the least expensive box. I know the one with honey and the vegetarian one is just slightly a little bit more expensive. The last thing I'm going to be grabbing is a block of cheese. I'll only be using half of this block of cheese for this recipe, and I'll save the rest for future recipes. So to get this dinner started, to the pan on my stove, I'm going to be adding in our half a pound of ground turkey. Break the ground turkey up and cook it through. Once it's cooked through, add the turkey to a large bowl and then add in the can of enchilada sauce, the drained can of corn that we got. Next, add in the drained and rinsed can of pinto beans, 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning, our box of Jiffy, and a third a cup of water. Give this a really good stir. I have a 9x13 baking dish right here. I'll spray it with plenty of nonstick spray, then add the casserole right into the baking dish. Spread it out to the best of your ability, and then I'm just going to shred half of the block of cheese that we got from the store. Sprinkle the shredded cheese right on top, and then bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 30 to 35 minutes, and then you could serve it up. We like to top this with kind of like our favorite taco topping, so I topped mine today with an avocado that I had on hand, some tomatoes, and sour cream, but top this with anything that you love. And you know what? Don't worry if you don't have any toppings on hand. This is really good alone too. I really think this ramen stir-fry recipe will surprise you, so to get it started, we're first going to be grabbing a frozen bag of stir-fry vegetables. I'm grabbing this deluxe bag. It has frozen broccoli, green beans, carrots, peppers, and more veggies in it. It is a delicious bag of vegetables. Next, we're going to be grabbing 3 packets of ramen. This is the only ramen brand my grocery store has right now, and we think it's pretty good. And then if you don't have soy sauce on hand, you could grab this great value bottle of soy sauce for only about $1.58, so you will be able to stay on budget. I didn't grab that bottle just because I do have soy sauce on hand. So to get this recipe started, to the pan on my stove, I added a tablespoon of olive oil, and once my oil was hot, I added our stir-fry vegetables right onto the pan, and I'm going to cook them for about 5 to 7 minutes to cook those veggies through. And while we have our veggies cooking up, I am going to start on our ramen. So to this pot of boiling water, add all 3 bags of ramen, save the seasoning packets to the side. And I do want to let you know, if you have more people you're feeding, you could always buy another bag of ramen or 2. And if you have less people you're feeding, just don't buy as many bags of ramen. But now that our ramen is cooked through, I am going to drain the ramen. Now add the ramen into the pan where we cooked the vegetables, and then add about 1/4 a cup of low sodium soy sauce. I do recommend the lower sodium soy sauce just so this isn't as salty. Then add in 1/4 a cup of water and just one of those ramen seasoning packets. You only need one, trust me, this will be super flavorful, but give this a stir and let this cook together for a couple of minutes, and then you could serve this up. Here's my bowl of food. I sprinkled mine with a little bit of sesame seeds, and let me tell you, this is so unbelievably good. It does not taste like you're trying to be on a budget, and this is super healthy and filling. Now we're making this magnificent sausage and egg casserole. So the first thing we're going to be grabbing from the store might seem a little odd and silly, but just trust this recipe, trust this process. It's going to turn out great. I first grabbed a can of Crescent rolls. Then I headed over to the meat area and I grabbed some sausage. You could buy the ground sausage like this, but we personally like the sausage links for this recipe. They're a little bit more expensive, but we really like them for this specific recipe. Then I headed over to the egg area and I was just completely shocked about those egg prices. They have really gone up recently, holy moly. And for 6 eggs, it is $3.03 at my Walmart. I don't know about your guys' grocery stores, but I just couldn't believe this, so I decided to go get my eggs at Smith's. Smith's wasn't too far from the Walmart I was shopping at, so I kind of wanted to see the egg prices there compared to Walmart. Smith's is kind of like a Kroger store here in Utah, so I just grabbed these dozen eggs for $4.89. It was a little bit cheaper here at this Kroger store, so I was happy to see that. Now let's head back to my house and get started. The first thing we're going to begin on is cooking up our sausage. I'm only using half of this package of sausage. Just go ahead and brown that sausage up right now. While our sausage is cooking away, we are going to crack our eggs into this bowl. So in this bowl, I cracked 6 eggs. The nice thing about this recipe is you only need 6 eggs, so that does make it a little bit more budget friendly. I whisked those eggs up, breaking the yolks, and then I added in my seasonings, a half a teaspoon of onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, pepper, and salt. Just whisk those seasonings in. You will need a 9x13 baking dish for this recipe, so I grabbed my baking dish, I sprayed it with nonstick spray just because you don't want the egg to stick to the baking dish. Then I grabbed my crescents and I am going to unroll them and place them onto the bottom of the baking dish. I'll set this to the side. Now that we have our sausage cooked through, I am going to slice it into discs and then kind of chop it into smaller pieces. You could really cut your sausage into however big or however small pieces you'd like. And then after I was finished with that, I grabbed my baking dish and I'm going to place the sausage over the top of the crescents. After you're finished with that and kind of spreading that sausage out, pour the egg mixture over the top and bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 22 to 28 minutes or until the egg has set. This makes the most delicious breakfast for dinner, or of course you can make this for regular breakfast. We had some tomatoes on hand, so I topped it with tomatoes and I served this with salsa. This recipe is amazing because you could really make it your own by adding veggies to this recipe or cheese or different meats. It's so good. Now we're making this chicken, broccoli, and wild rice casserole, and don't go judging this recipe on me until you try it. It is really, really good. So the first thing I grabbed from the store was a can of cream of mushroom soup. I also grabbed a can of cream of chicken soup, and then I headed over to the canned meat area and I grabbed a can of chicken. Grabbing cans of chicken like this is a great budget-friendly way to add chicken to your recipes when you're really trying to stay on a stricter budget. And then I went over to the rice area and I grabbed a box of long grain and wild rice, rice-a-roni. Or you could use really any type of rice-a-roni you like for this recipe. Then I went over to the frozen veggies and I wanted to grab a frozen bag of broccoli florets, but they only had the frozen broccoli cuts, so I just grabbed those broccoli cuts. Let's head back to the house and get started. To this big bowl, add in the box of long grain and wild rice. Also add in the seasoning packet that comes with that rice. Then you're going to want to add in the bag of frozen broccoli that we got from the store, followed by the can of chicken. After you add that chicken in, add in your can of cream of mushroom and cream of chicken soup. After you're through adding both of those cans in, add in 1 cup of water. And then after you add that water in, go ahead and add in your seasonings. You could really use any type of seasonings you like, but I added in a teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder and paprika, and then a half a teaspoon of salt and pepper. Then you're going to want to give this a really good stir. I'll set this to the side. I pulled out my 9x13 baking dish and I'll spray it with plenty of nonstick spray. After you're through spraying this, go ahead and add the casserole right in there. And then after you add that casserole in there and kind of spread it out evenly, cover this with aluminum foil and bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 50 to 60 minutes or until the rice is nice and tender. Here's the finished product. This isn't a super thick, dense casserole. It's a little bit more thin and my family really enjoys it like that. I topped mine with a little bit of cheese that I had on hand. This is so flavorful and delicious. I promise you are going to love it just as much as we do. Now we're making this tomato bacon Alfredo, and the first thing we're going to be grabbing from the store is about a pound of pasta. And I don't know what your shelves look like at your store for pasta, but I don't typically have a ton of selection, so I was going to buy a pound of fettuccine pasta, but they only had this linguine, so I just got that instead. Next, I grabbed a can of petite diced tomatoes. This is a petite diced tomatoes with olive oil and garlic, so it's going to give this dish a lot of flavor. Now we're going to be grabbing a jar of Alfredo sauce. This is about 16 ounces of that Alfredo sauce. And then grab one of these packages of real bacon bits. It's about $1.70 total, so it is a pretty good price. The first thing I'm doing is boiling up our pasta in this pot of water. I'm just boiling it according to the box instructions, nothing special. But while that pasta is cooking away, I am starting on the sauce. So to this large pan, I added my jar of Alfredo right in there, and there's always so much sauce left over in these jars, so I don't always show this on camera, but I typically like to add some water to my jar, give it a shake, and then add the excess sauce right into the pan. Then I added in my can of petite diced tomatoes. I did partially drain that can. Last thing I did was add most of those bacon bits into the pan. I gave this a stir and I let this simmer covered for about 5 minutes. I did stir it often while it was simmering, but after that simmering time was up, my house was smelling so good. I can't even explain it to you. It really was smelling good. But then I added in my drained pasta. I gave this a stir and then it was time to serve it up. Here's what dinner looks like, and if you know me, you probably know by now how much I love pasta dishes. One thing I love about this pasta dish is it almost has kind of like a smoky flavor about it from the bacon. It is just super duper good. You gotta give this one a try. I'm sure you're going to love it. Now we're making this French bread pizza. The first thing that we're needing for this recipe is a loaf of French bread. So I grabbed this one and I can't believe it's $1.47. I remember when it was just $1 at my grocery store for years and years. Then I grabbed a can of tomato sauce for 44 cents. This is my little pizza sauce trick that I'm going to show you here in a moment. Then I grabbed our cheese and our pepperoni. I only used about half of this bag of pepperoni for our pizzas. Now let's let's get this recipe started. The first thing I'm going to do is slice our French bread in half just like this. Now we're going to be making our butter mixture. So I have 4 tablespoons of melted butter. I added in a dash of garlic powder, onion powder, and Italian seasoning. I'm going to brush this butter mixture all over the French bread on the inside just like this. This is going to give this pizza so much great flavor. After I was through with that, I baked this in a preheated oven to 425 degrees for about 5 minutes. While it was baking in the oven, I'm going to start on our pizza sauce now. So I have our tomato sauce right here. I added it into this bowl. Then I added in a dash of pepper, a teaspoon of salt, and about 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. This is my little hack for inexpensive pizza sauce, and it really is super duper good. I definitely recommend you trying it out. After the bread was out of the oven, I poured the pizza sauce on the inside of the bread, kind of like how you would with a normal pizza. And then after I was finished with that, I sprinkled our mozzarella cheese over the top. And then after I added our cheese, I added our pepperonis. And I do want to let you know, of course, you could customize these pizzas however you want to eat them. You could add sausage or veggies, really anything you like. This baked in my oven for 5 to 7 more minutes or until the cheese was nice and melty. This is such a fun twist on regular pizza night, and that garlicky butter sauce that we brushed on the bread before we baked it gives this so much added flavor. I definitely recommend you doing that. These are just really, really good. I love potato soup, especially at this time of year, so now that's what we're making. The first thing I'm going to be grabbing is a bag of hash browns. This is the Southern O'Brien style hash brown, so it has the added onions and the peppers in it. This is going to give our soup some extra flavor. Let's head over to the gravy aisle now and grab a packet of country gravy. And a lot of times we think the store brand is going to be cheaper than the name brand, but do pay attention to the price per ounce because the Walmart brand was 49 cents per ounce versus this brand was only 40 cents per ounce, so that was cheaper. Now I'm going to be grabbing this little box of Knorr bouillon and let's head back to the house and get cooking. So the first thing I'm doing is to this large pot adding our bag of hash browns right in there. Then I'm going to be adding our packet of country gravy, add that entire packet right in there. Then I'm going to be adding our bouillon. You're only going to be using 2 of these bouillon cubes, not the entire box. Next, add in 4 cups of water and bring this up to a boil. Once it does start boiling, bring this down to a simmer and let it simmer for about 15 minutes, stirring it frequently until it gets to the thickness that you like your potato soup to be. Once it got to this thickness, I served it up and I topped our bowls of soup just with some toppings that I already had on hand, like shredded cheese, sour cream, cooked crumbled bacon, and sliced green onions. But you could serve yours with whatever you have on hand, or if you don't have any toppings on hand, this potato soup is good just by itself. Now we're making this vegetable pasta soup, so let's first head down the bean aisle and get our cans of beans. So we're first grabbing a can of cannellini beans. These are kind of like white beans. We're also going to be grabbing a can of green beans. As you see, they were on sale. Green beans tend to go on sale at this time of year. And then I grabbed a can of diced tomatoes, followed by a box of ziti pasta. I didn't use the entire box of ziti pasta. I only used about 2 cups of it. Now let's get started. To this pot I added in 5 cups of water along with 1 cube of bouillon. This is just the bouillon packet that I used for the potato soup recipe. Then I added in a can of diced tomatoes along with our can of cannellini beans. I did drain those beans. I also added in our green beans that I drained. Then I added in our 2 cups of ziti pasta. Next you're going to add in your seasonings, a half a teaspoon of pepper, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of rosemary, then about 2 teaspoons of salt. You're going to give this a stir and you're going to let this simmer for about 10 to 12 minutes, stirring it often until your pasta is nice and tender. My house was smelling so good at this point. I served our soup up, and we like to eat ours topped with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. This soup is extremely nutrient rich. It has so many different vitamins in it, and it's really easy to throw together and so budget friendly. My little toddler especially loves this soup. Now we're making this white bean and spinach soup. So while I'm at the store, the first thing I'm going to grab is an onion. And typically yellow onions are the least expensive onion at the store. But today I looked over at the white onions and they were actually the same price as the yellow onions. And I just grabbed a white onion. We like how the white onion has a little bit sweeter flavor. It's high in fiber and super anti-inflammatory. So I put that in my cart. The next thing I'm going to be grabbing is a can of cannellini beans. After I put those cannellini beans in my cart, I grabbed a can of petite diced tomatoes. This is the big can of diced tomatoes. It's about 28 ounces. And the last thing we're going to be grabbing is a bag of frozen spinach. This frozen spinach has 12 ounces of spinach in it. There's a ton of spinach in this bag for only $1.12, so it really is a really great value. So back over to my house, I'm just going to dice up our onion, and over to my pot on the stove, I'm adding in about a tablespoon of olive oil. Once my oil's hot, I added the onion right in there. I'm going to cook the onion for a couple of minutes just to soften it. Once the onion gets nice and soft, I added in about a tablespoon of minced garlic. Give this a stir, let the garlic become fragrant. It only takes about 10 seconds. Now add in a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of oregano, and then one of these bouillon cubes. I like to keep these on hand, and they go really far in recipes. Like I'm just using one for this specific recipe. It's kind of like a substitute for chicken broth. Then I added in 6 cups of water along with our cannellini beans and our big can of petite diced tomatoes. The last thing I'm adding in is our bag of frozen spinach. And if you're not the biggest fan of spinach in the world, you don't have to add this big bag in. You could use half the bag or a quarter of this bag, but we really like spinach, and spinach is super high in iron. I'm going to let this simmer for about 15 minutes on low. After that cooking time is up, this is ready to serve. Here's what my bowl of soup looks like. I topped mine with some of that mozzarella cheese I had on hand, but you don't have to if you don't want to. This soup is extremely delicious. Those beans are high in fiber and protein. The spinach is great for your immune system, and those diced tomatoes are surprisingly great for your skin. Now we're making this enchilada casserole, and this one brings back so many memories. It's a family favorite for sure. There was a time period when we really couldn't hardly afford groceries. We were on food stamps, and when I would make this dinner, it was kind of like the grand dinner. We would get so excited about it, and we just loved it so much. I first grabbed a can of pinto beans. Next, I grabbed a can of black beans. Both of those cans are under $1 each. Now I'm grabbing a can of corn. I know a lot of different foods have really gone up in price, but here in Utah, corn has really stayed the same price over time. Now I'm grabbing a can of enchilada sauce. Over the years, I found that this is the best priced brand in my area. The last thing I'm grabbing is a bag of corn tortillas. I definitely suggest you grabbing corn tortillas over flour tortillas, just because corn tortillas hold up best when baking. Let's head back to my house and get started. To this medium-sized bowl, I'm adding in a tablespoon of minced garlic. Next, add in our drained can of corn. Then add in our pinto beans. I did drain and rinse these pinto beans and our can of black beans as well. Then we're going to add in our seasonings. This is what's really going to give this flavor. A teaspoon of cumin, teaspoon of onion and garlic powder, and then a half a teaspoon of pepper. Give this a really good stir. I have my 9x13 baking dish right here. I'm spraying it with plenty of nonstick spray. Then I'm adding in half of our can of enchilada sauce. Spread that out just so it's covering the bottom of the pan. Then you're going to add about 6 corn tortillas down at the bottom of your pan. Over the corn tortillas, go ahead and add about half of that bean mixture that we made up. Over the bean mixture, you are going to add about 6 more corn tortillas. You could always add more or less corn tortillas depending on if you like a lot or a little bit of them. Then over the top, add the remaining bean mixture and the rest of the can of enchilada sauce. This is completely optional, but I did have a little bit of some Mexican style cheese on hand that I wanted to use, so I sprinkled that over the top, but if you don't have cheese, you don't have to add it. This baked on 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Top this with your favorite toppings. We topped ours with avocado, sour cream, and tomatoes, but if you don't have any toppings on hand, I totally understand. This casserole is also good alone. You don't have to top it with anything. It's super full of flavor, and like I said, my family loves it. Now we're making this lentil spaghetti, and before you go judging this recipe, give it a chance. I headed down the bean and rice aisle and I grabbed a bag of lentils. This whole bag is $1.34, and I didn't even use half the bag. I only used a half a cup of it, so this is very affordable. Lentils are also considered a superfood. Next, I'm grabbing another can of spaghetti sauce. I'm just grabbing the garlic and herb flavor right now. Then we're going to go head over to the spaghetti noodles, and I did grab a bag of these spaghetti noodles for under $1. Now let's head over to the frozen vegetables, and I grabbed a bag of this zucchini blend. I have been craving like zucchini and squash recently, so this is why I grabbed this bag, but you could use any type of frozen vegetables you like for this recipe. Let's head back to my house now and get started. The first thing we're going to be doing is cleaning and rinsing our half a cup of lentils. So I just have my over the sink strainer right here. I'm just adding the lentils, and I'm going to rinse them and kind of sort through them. Since lentils are grown in the ground, you might find like a little pebble in there, so just look through them. I just found like a little bit of dirt, but after I was through cleaning our lentils, I brought them over to the large pot on my stove and I added them right in there. Next, you're going to be adding in about 2 cups of water, or you could use broth if you'd like for more flavor. Now I added in a bay leaf along with a teaspoon of oregano, half a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of pepper. Give this a stir and let this simmer covered for about 25 to 30 minutes, or until the lentils become tender. You do want to stir it occasionally while it's simmering, but then I started boiling up our spaghetti noodles in another pot. Now that my lentils are nice and tender, I remove the lid and I'm removing the bay leaf in there, and I'm going to let this simmer uncovered for a couple of minutes just to absorb the liquid. Now I'm adding in our bag of frozen zucchini and squash along with our can of pasta sauce. Now I'm going to give this a really good stir and let this simmer for about 5 to 10 minutes. While this was simmering, I did stir it occasionally so nothing stuck to the bottom of my pot, but once the simmering time was up, I just added my drained spaghetti into the pot. I'm going to give this a stir, and then it is time to serve it up. And here's what dinner looks like. If you don't typically cook with lentils, you need to start cooking with them more often. I like to think of them as kind of like a powerhouse of nutrition. They're high in potassium, fiber, and folate. They're also super budget friendly. Now we're making this spaghetti with squash. It only has a few ingredients, and I was actually originally going to use a zucchini for this recipe, not a yellow squash, but when I went to grab a zucchini in that section, they were all sold out, but then I saw that they had squash, and the squash was the same price, so I just grabbed one of those squash, and after weighing it, it came out to only being about 70 cents, so that's a really good price, and squash do have a lot of health benefits, just like zucchini. Next, I'm going to grab a pound of spaghetti, and then I am going to be grabbing a can of pasta sauce. And if you are looking to save money on pasta sauce, I definitely recommend you getting a can of the sauce over like a jar of the sauce. Typically the jars of sauce are twice the price. Now I'm going to start this recipe out by cutting my squash into smaller cubes. Over to a pot on the stove, I have some boiling water in there. I'll add my spaghetti and I'm going to cook it according to the package instructions. beans. Now over to the pan on my stove, I'm going to add in about a tablespoon of olive oil. Once that gets hot, I'll add in my squash along with my seasonings, a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, garlic powder, onion powder, then a half a teaspoon of oregano. Cook this together for about 3 to 4 minutes. Now that my squash is tender, I'm going to add in my can of pasta sauce. I'm also going to add in about a third a cup of water. I just added that water into my can of pasta sauce. Give this a stir and let this simmer together for about 5 minutes. After this is through simmering, you could serve it up. Just serve the sauce and the squash over the bed of noodles. This is so good, super flavorful, and that squash adds some extra protein and added health benefits. Now we're making this rice casserole. This casserole is very easy to make, so the first thing we're going to be grabbing at the store is a 1-pound bag of rice. This rice is under $1. Next, I'll pick up a can of black beans and a can of kidney beans, but you could really use any type of beans that you like. You could use pinto beans, great northern beans, really any beans. Now I'm grabbing a can of tomato sauce, and lastly, I'll pick up a package of bouillon cubes. Bouillon cubes really add a lot of flavor to recipes. So now to this large bowl, I'm going to add in the bag of rice that we picked up. Next, add in 3 tablespoons of olive oil, the drained and rinsed can of black beans and kidney beans. Next, add in the can of tomato sauce and then our seasonings. There's quite a few seasonings, but this recipe is very flavorful. Add in a teaspoon of cumin, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, a teaspoon of paprika, oregano, dried basil, a teaspoon of onion powder and garlic powder, a teaspoon of pepper, a tablespoon of salt, and those are all of the seasonings. Now I have 2 cups of water right here. This water is like boiling water. I put it in my microwave to heat up. To the water, add in 2 of the beef bouillon cubes that we got from the store and stir it super duper well to dissolve those cubes. Then add this into our big bowl and give it a stir. I have a 9x13 baking dish right here. I'll spray it with a nonstick spray, then I'll add the casserole right in there. Spread the rice casserole out to the best of your ability and then cover this tightly with aluminum foil. You're going to want to bake this on 350 degrees for about 50 to 55 minutes or until the rice is tender. Once the rice is tender, give this a stir and then you could serve it up. Go ahead and top this with whatever toppings you have on hand or whatever kind of like taco toppings you have. And again, if you don't have any toppings on hand, this casserole is very flavorful in itself. This one is also a meatless meal, but it's not lacking in any protein because it has all of those beans. It's really delicious. Now we're making these barbecue hot dogs over mashed potatoes, but you could use smoked sausage as a substitute if you like. But since I am using the hot dogs, I'm picking up this 12-ounce package of hot dogs right now. But of course, like I said, if you wanted to use smoked sausage, you could use that instead of the hot dogs. My family really likes broccoli, so that is what I'm getting for the vegetable today. And as you could see, this 12-ounce bag of broccoli florets, it's $1.16. But I looked up and I saw the bag of broccoli cuts for 12 ounces. It was only 88 cents for the bag. So that is like almost a 30-cent savings. So I went with the broccoli cuts and we served this dinner over mashed potatoes, and I'm just picking up this package of instant mashed potatoes for under $1. Now my family really likes this Great Value brand of barbecue sauce. I remember when it was only 88 cents a few years back. Prices have really gone up. But to start out this recipe, I am just going to be slicing my hot dogs into half moons. Over to my stove, I'm just adding in about a tablespoon of olive oil to this pan. Once it's hot, I just added in the hot dogs along with the bag of broccoli cuts. I'm just going to cook this together for about 8 to 10 minutes. And while this is cooking away, I just added the bag of mashed potatoes into boiling water, and I'm going to let this cook according to the package instructions. Now that my hot dogs and the broccoli are cooked through, I'll add in 1 cup of barbecue sauce and let this cook together for an additional 3 to 4 minutes, and then you could serve it up. This dinner definitely does not taste cheap at all. Those hot dogs don't taste like basic hot dogs. This dinner is really good. My entire family absolutely loves it, and it really is perfect for this time of year. Now we are making this turkey shepherd's pie, and for this recipe I'll be using the other half of the ground turkey that we used earlier. Next, I'm going to be grabbing a package of instant mashed potatoes. The third item I'll be getting today is a 12-ounce bag of frozen mixed vegetables. Next, I'm going to be grabbing a can of cream of mushroom soup for only 68 cents. And wow, look at the price difference between the name brand and the store brand. I really personally can't tell a huge taste difference between the two, and it kind of is a big price difference. And here's something that might be a little confusing. This bag of pre-shredded cheese just looks huge. The packaging is really big and bulky, but there's only 8 ounces of cheese in that bag, and the price is $2.22. So if you look over at the blocks of cheese, the packaging definitely looks slimmer, and it doesn't look like there's as much cheese in there, but there is. There's 8 ounces of cheese in this block of cheese, and that is a 22-cent saving. This is only $2. So if you shred your cheese at home, you will be saving money, and I do think shredding your cheese at home, I just think the cheese tastes a little better. But now that we're back at my house, we're just going to cook up a half a pound of the ground turkey on my stove. Just break the turkey up with your meat masher and cook it through. While the turkey is cooking away, I am going to prepare the mashed potatoes according to the package instructions, but I added in 1/3 cup extra water. This will help the potatoes go further in the recipe, and then it will also help the potatoes not dry out as much from baking in the oven. But now that my ground turkey is cooked through, I'm just going to stir in the bag of frozen vegetables, and I'm going to cook this together for about 2 to 3 minutes. After this is finished cooking together, I'm going to add in a can of cream of mushroom soup along with my seasonings. I added in a teaspoon of pepper, salt, Italian seasoning, paprika, onion powder, and garlic powder. Give this a stir. Now that this is well combined, I pulled out my casserole dish. Spray your casserole dish with plenty of nonstick spray, then add the casserole right in there. Spread it out to the best of your ability, and then you are going to add the prepared mashed potatoes over the top. Spread those mashed potatoes out, and then you are going to add 4 ounces of shredded cheddar cheese over the top. Sprinkle that cheese all over, and then you are going to bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 35 to 40 minutes. This is one of those dinners that definitely does not taste budget friendly at all. It has so many different yummy vegetables in it, and you could always make this your own by adding different veggies if you'd like, or you could use different meats if you'd like. It really is so good. Now we're making this one pot sausage, broccoli, and rice dish. To my cutting board, I am going to slice my 13 ounces of turkey sausage into little discs, just like this. Now that I'm through with that, I went over to the pan on my stove and I added a tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil. Once the butter melted down and the oil was hot, I added that sausage in there, and I'm going to brown the sausage on each side until it's kind of like a golden color. This adds so much flavor to that sausage. Now that I'm finished with that, I added in 12 ounces of frozen broccoli florets. I found that frozen broccoli, after everything's gone up in price, it's kind of stayed the same price at my local stores. So this is a great veggie to buy. It's affordable and you get quite a bit of it for the price. I added that broccoli in there. I gave it a good stir. Now I'm going to season it up. I added in 1/2 teaspoon of onion powder, oregano, paprika, salt, and pepper. And then I gave this one last stir, and I let this cook covered for about 5 minutes to soften the broccoli. Now that I have my broccoli to the tenderness that I like it to be, I added in a cup and a half of cooked brown rice, or you could use white rice, along with a dash of onion powder and paprika for extra flavor. I gave this a stir to combine the ingredients, then it was ready to serve. Here's my bowl of food. This is a delicious, healthy meal that you could get for so inexpensive. Also, this does make quite a bit of food, so if you're a larger family, this one's great for you. You could also have this recipe very easily. Now we're making this creamy veggie pasta, and this one is a meatless meal. To my pot of boiling water, I added in 10 ounces of penne pasta, or you could use any type of pasta you like. Go ahead and stir it and cook it according to the box instructions. Over to the pan on my stove, I have a tablespoon of hot olive oil in there. Then I added in 8 ounces of white mushrooms that I sliced, along with 1 white onion that I diced and a tablespoon of minced garlic. Let these veggies cook together until the mushrooms and the onion have softened. And then once they get to that point, you're going to add in a 14-ounce can of petite diced tomatoes. I love buying cans of diced tomatoes like this because they are less than $1 and they have loads of vitamin C and potassium in them, so they're very healthy for you, and it really will help you on your grocery budget. So I added that in there. You'll also want to add in about 3/4 cup of coconut milk, or you could use heavy whipping cream, whatever you prefer. And then for the seasonings, add in a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of pepper, and 2 teaspoons of Cajun seasoning. Give this a stir and let it simmer for about 4 minutes. After that was through simmering, I added in our cooked drained penne pasta and I gave this a stir. This is totally optional, but we do like thicker sauce in our house, so I added in a cornstarch slurry, which was just a tablespoon of cornstarch and a tablespoon of water mixed together. And as you see, it does thicken the sauce up a little bit, but now it's time to serve it up. I topped mine with a little bit of black pepper and Parmesan cheese. This is so amazing, and I love how it's a meatless meal, so you got so many different veggies in there. For Sunday night's dinner, we are having these fall apart tender barbecue chicken drumsticks. So I have my bag of drumsticks right here, and I'm going to divide it between like a Ziploc bag and a plate. The Ziploc bag we're having for another night's dinner, and the plate we're having for tonight. And I counted, and there's about 22 chicken drumsticks in the bag. And when you divide them, there's about like 11 for each dinner. So that's a lot of chicken drumsticks in that bag for only about $5. So there is a really great value there. I'll just place these drumsticks in the fridge, and I'm going to grab the other drumsticks. For tonight's dinner, this recipe is actually in my cookbook on page 165. I'm just making like a variation of it for tonight, but I placed the drumsticks in my slow cooker, and I'm going to season them with salt, pepper, paprika, onion powder, and garlic powder, but you could use more seasonings or less seasonings depending on what you have on hand. And then the very last thing I'm going to do is pour 1 cup of barbecue sauce on top. This recipe is so easy, but I swear these chicken drumsticks are like the best ever. So just add that barbecue sauce in and cook this on low for about 7 to 8 hours. Now that the cooking time is up and the chicken drumsticks are fall apart tender, I have a sheet pan here and I have it lined with parchment paper. Place the drumsticks on the sheet pan, and then you're going to pour more barbecue sauce over the top and then just brush it all around so it gets everywhere. Place this in your oven under the broiler for about 2 to 3 minutes, and this will caramelize the barbecue sauce and make them extra amazing. Here's my plate of food. For extra nutrients, we served our drumsticks with that bag of steamable mixed vegetables. I just added a little butter and salt to that bag, but these will be the best barbecue chicken drumsticks you will ever have. They're so easy to eat because they're so fall apart tender. For the next night's dinner, we are making this salsa chicken and rice. So to my slow cooker, I'm adding the remaining chicken drumsticks in my Ziploc bag. Just add them right into your slow cooker. Next, add in 1 cup of salsa. You could really use any type of salsa that you like or have on hand. I'm just using this salsa that we grabbed from the store. Now, if you have some taco seasoning on hand, just add in about a tablespoon of that. But if you don't have it on hand, don't worry, you don't need to add it. Just cook this on low for for 7 to 8 hours. And on the side, I just made up 1 cup of our white rice just in my Instant Pot. So super easy. And then I served our chicken drumsticks over that rice, and we like to kind of like eat the chicken with the rice. It is really good. So this salsa chicken and rice is super delicious. It's super high in protein and really affordable. For the next night's dinner, we are making these taco bowls. So into my slow cooker, I'm adding 3/4 cup of our white rice. Just add it right in there. Next, add in 3/4 cup of our salsa. And then for the water, I'm using 1 3/4 cup of just regular water. Now add in the drained and rinsed can of black beans. And then I'm adding in about 4 cloves of our garlic. I just chopped that garlic up into smaller pieces. Now add in 1/4 of our onion with a teaspoon of salt, and then give this a stir. Cook this on low for about 3 to 4 hours or until the rice is tender. If you have some taco toppings on hand, like sour cream, cheese, guacamole, or really anything, you could top your taco bowl with that. Or if you don't have anything on hand, don't worry. This is super good without any toppings as well. This has really high protein from those beans. It really is filling and flavorful. Now we're making this turkey and rice goulash, so the first thing that we're going to be grabbing at the grocery store is 1 pound of ground turkey. As you see, this festive brand of ground turkey is only $2.54, whereas the Genio brand of ground turkey is $3.17 in the refrigerated section. So look in the freezer section for the ground turkey. It is a little bit less expensive. Now I'm going to be grabbing a bag of rice. Rice is super filling, and as you see, I could grab this 1 pound bag of rice for under $1 and it will make multiple meals. Then I grabbed a can of diced tomatoes. This diced tomatoes has garlic and olive oil in it, so it has extra flavor. Now I'm grabbing 1 can of mixed vegetables. Let's head back to the house and get started. The first thing we're making for this recipe is our rice, and I'm making it in my Instant Pot. You're only going to need about 1.5 cups of rice for this recipe. You don't need the entire bag. As you see, there's extra rice here for different recipes. Then I added in about 2 cups of water and a tablespoon of olive oil. I gave this a stir and I pressed the rice button. If you don't want to cook your rice in an Instant Pot or you don't have one, you could cook it in a rice cooker or just simply over the stove. But while our rice is cooking away, I am going to start on our ground turkey. So to the pan on my stove, I'm going to add our turkey down, and I'm going to break it up and cook the turkey through at this point. Once our turkey was cooked through, I added in our seasonings, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of onion and garlic powder, and then a teaspoon of salt. And I do want to let you know, if you're on a budget, seasonings are pretty low cost and they will last quite a while. And if you add a bunch of seasonings to your food, it will really amp up your food, so just keep that in mind. Then I added in our drained can of mixed vegetables along with our can of diced tomatoes. I gave this a stir and I let this simmer with the lid on for about 5 to 7 minutes. Now I'm going to add our cooked rice right in there, give this a really good stir to combine the ingredients, and then it is time to serve it up. This dinner is so unbelievably good, especially for the cost. It is full of immense flavor. This is another one of those meals that does make for great leftovers for the next day. So you can meal prep this one for the week, and it is so tasty. Now we're making this lentil stew, so to get it started, I like to clean my lentils, so I'm using 1.5 cups of lentils for this recipe, and I'm just going to place them in my strainer, and I'm going to rinse them with water. Sometimes lentils have like a little bit of dirt on them just because how they're grown, and then you might be able to find like a pebble in them like occasionally, so I just like to clean them. Now I'm going to dice up part of our onion, 6 carrots, and 6 cloves of our garlic. quick. Over to my slow cooker, I'm just going to add all of these vegetables right in there. Then I'm going to add my rinsed lentils in as well. Next, add 3 bouillon cubes along with our can of diced tomatoes. Then add in 4.5 cups of water. At this point, you could add in any other seasonings that you'd like bay leaf would be really good in this, or really anything. I just kept it simple today. Cook this on low for about 7 hours or until the lentils are to the tenderness that you like them to be. My house was smelling so good at this point. Lentils are super high in protein, iron, folate, and B vitamins. If you didn't know that yet, they're just really healthy for you, and they're super inexpensive. So I really like cooking with lentils, and lentils are actually one of my husband's favorite foods. He's been asking me to cook with them recently, so this was really delicious. Now we're making this classic easy goulash, so over to my pot on the stove, I'm adding in half of our sausage. I'm going to be using the other half of sausage for another recipe. Next, add in 1/4 of our onion that you diced. Break the sausage up and cook it through. Once your sausage is cooked through, just add in 8 ounces of elbow pasta. It's just half of this 16-ounce box. Now I'm going to add in the remaining bag of frozen mixed vegetables along with 2 bouillon cubes. Also add in 5 cups of water, and then you're going to add in the can of pasta sauce. Next, add in half of the can of tomato paste and give this a good stir. And once this starts to simmer, you're going to want to add in your seasoning. So add in a 1/2 tablespoon of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Or you could use any type of seasonings that you like. Let this simmer on your stove for about 12 minutes. Stir it often, just so the pasta doesn't burn to the bottom of the pot. And if the liquid line gets too low, just add in some water until your pasta is tender. I had Parmesan cheese in the fridge, so we sprinkled the top of ours with Parmesan cheese, but you certainly do not have to do that. This is so rich and flavorful. It does not taste like you're trying to be on such a budget. That's what I really like about this goulash, and it's really simple to throw together. I need to make breakfast for dinner more often. It's normally affordable and just really good. So to the pan on my stove, I added in a tablespoon of olive oil. Now I'm adding in 1/4 of our onion along with the diced bell pepper. I'm going to cook these 2 peppers and onions together for a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to add in the other 1/2 pound of the sausage. Just break the sausage up and cook it through. While our sausage is cooking away, I am going to get started on the eggs now. So over to this large bowl, I'm going to add 12 eggs right in there. Whisk the eggs up to break the yolks, and then you're going to want to add in either a 1/2 cup of water or milk. Since I didn't buy milk at the store, I'm just adding in water. If you didn't know that, you could do that with your eggs. I'm also seasoning them with a dash of salt, pepper, and paprika, but use any seasonings that you love. Give this a whisk and then pull out a 9x13 baking dish. You're going to want to spray that baking dish with nonstick spray just for easy cleanup in the end. Pour the eggs right in there, and then you are going to sprinkle the sausage, onion, pepper mixture all over the top and then kind of spread it out. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for 30 minutes or until the egg has set. Egg casseroles are great like this because you can make them your own so easily by adding ingredients that your family likes and just making them your own. For example, my husband poured some hot sauce over the top of his dinner, but this is absolutely delicious and very high protein and nutritious. Now I'm going to show you this chili macaroni soup. So to the pot on my stove, I'm adding in a tablespoon of olive oil along with the remaining onion I diced. Cook this together for about 2 minutes to soften the onion. Now add in the remaining tomato paste, and this is a good little trick to get tomato paste out of a can. Just open both sides and push it through. Stir this around and let the tomato paste cook for a couple minutes. This will bring out the flavor of the tomato paste. Then add in the diced tomatoes, your 2 cans of chili beans. Make sure you don't drain your chili beans. Now add in the remaining 8 ounces of elbow pasta along with 1 bouillon cube. Now add in 4 cups of water, and then for the seasonings, this gives it a lot of flavor. A half a tablespoon of brown sugar, 2 teaspoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of pepper, and a teaspoon of dried oregano. Give this a stir and let this simmer for about 12 minutes, stirring occasionally until the pasta is tender. Once the pasta is tender, you could serve this up. Here is my bowl of food. We topped ours with a little bit of shredded cheese and sour cream, kind of as you would for like chili, but top yours with anything that you have on hand or enjoy. This is full of so much immense flavor. I really know you're going to like this one. I would love to have you over here, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Bye for now.